there are two big considerations that are out there that the public should have in mind when they listen to the debate, if they do later today. One, this is the first time that the president's party has ever controlled a Senate trial in the history of the United States. It's never happened before. It was either it was the other party or it was a faction in the case of Andrew Johnson. This is the first time. So the problem for the Democrats is that it's the president's party who's running the show in the Senate. And they understandably are nervous and want some protections right at the beginning. Second big difference is that we witnessed the largest cover-up, the largest stonewall of an impeachment in history during the House period of this. So this is the context.
You're saying because of the documents?
Because they didn't respond to one, the president didn't respond to one subpoena. That's unprecedented. Richard Nixon didn't get to the trial stage, but he did respond to subpoenas for documents.
Let me just stop right there, because Republican Senator Santorum was on last night saying, look, administrations do that all the time. They refuse congressional subpoenas.
What Senator Santorum's argument was, he talked about Fast and Furious. He talked about Clinton. He talked about Obama. One of the things that George Washington set down was the understanding that there's something different about an impeachment. Yes, there's going to be struggle between the executive branch and the legislative branch. And George Washington said to the House, you know, you want documents about foreign affairs, I'm going to give them to you. It's not your province. But if you'd asked me for an impeachment, that'd be different. So the argument that there's always been a push and pull between the two branches, of course, but this is different. This is special, and our founders understood it as such. So I don't think the Obama argument is useful at all. One last point that's very important. If you have this massive stonewall, the Senate has the power in our Constitution to be an active player in judging a president. The idea that it's supposed to be passive, that it's supposed to, in the words of Adam Schiff, read the cold record of the grand jury and live with it, is nonsense. The Senate knows, all those senators know, that the White House is stonewalled. They have an obligation to the public to try to get the information that the House couldn't get.
But Laura, it's not just witnesses, it's also these documents, which haven't gotten probably as much attention, but Democrats today, Jerry Nadler certainly focusing on documents, as well as Schumer.
Schumer said that's going to be their first motion.
Right. And explain why the documents are so critical.
Well, you know, documents don't have that little nagging problem of bias normally or of partisanship. They speak for themselves. Hence, you often hear in court the documents speak for themselves. Now, of course, you know sometimes how they're written or why they were written or the motivation, the context is important to give the full story. But if you're using documents as a way to explain the story, you take away the idea of people having little bugs in their ear.
We're talking about tens of thousands of documents.
Tens of thousands. I mean, remember, in the Clinton impeachment, it was 90,000 documents that were handed over willingly by a president. You're talking about documents that give you the contextual information you really need to understand what the president was doing, which is why it's pretty ridiculous. If you heard Mitt Romney say, Anderson, to Mona Raju, the idea of, well, you know what, don't worry that it's going late into the night. The media will give you the summary in the morning for the American people. I mean, the idea that you'd have this notion of separation of powers and oversight, that documents being so important to give a full story in the landscape, and that it need not happen while the American public has the ability to see transparency in action and judge themselves through their senators, is another example of why this trial, in many ways, as some have called it rigged, I call it an incomplete exercise in democracy, because you have to have the documents, the transparency, and a willing and able body of senators who want the information.
But here's the issue. The Senate has no more power to get those documents than the House does. And I think we're going to hear that sort of over and over again from the Republican senators, is the House had the opportunity to get these documents. The House had the opportunity to get these witnesses. It decided it could do a complete investigation. In fact, the House managers say they've got an overwhelming case without all of that information. Now we're in the Senate. The Republican senators are going to say, look, we've got the same problems. We asked for those documents. The White House is going to assert executive privilege. And now we're forced with having to litigate in court, which would take forever. House, you said this was an emergency. We had to make a decision on it very quickly. Well, we're in the same boat.
Yes, but